Hello there. In my Christmas video I mentioned how I wanted to try out the diesel heater that I installed back in, it might have been February, March, just springtime anyway, because I've never really given it a full usage test. I checked it worked, but I've never actually been away in the van for any period of time to see that it will work in a sort of ongoing, keeping me warm basis. And I happen to have today and tomorrow free, and the temperature is what I would describe as chilly. It's not amazingly cold. It's about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius today, and I think it's going to get down to about 1 or 2 Celsius, so just above freezing overnight. And I thought, that's pretty good. Not so cold that if it doesn't work I'll be absolutely turning into an icebox, but cold enough to see that it actually does do the job and can keep me warm. So I've got a few provisions together. I'm not going far away from home, so that again, if it all goes horribly wrong, I can just drive back. But I thought I would go away for a night in the van and see how well the diesel heater does. However, having not run it now since I installed it, which is several months ago, I suppose before I even leave, I ought to just check that it will still start up. First things first then, let's power on the electrics. Turn the switch in here. Where's it gone? There it is. Okay, incidentally, how's the old battery doing? 13.5 volts. It's just been sitting there, quietly ticking over with the solar keeping it topped up. Of course, in theory, you shouldn't keep a lithium topped up to full, but I don't think there's a way of telling the charge controller not to do it. Anyway, it's probably fine. Let's stick the heater on. It's actually colder than I thought. 2 degrees Celsius. Now the other question is, I can't remember how to actually work this thing, so let's just try turning it on. Does that make it come on? I honestly can't remember. Or is that just setting the heating? Temperature mode. I'm going to have to read the manual, aren't I? Alright, back in a second. No, I just kept pressing buttons until we got to setting the temperature at 20, and it went whoosh, and it's come up with a red light, but it's making a very gentle whirring noise. Down there, where the heat comes out, there's a faint whir. In a minute then it should start clicking the pump to bring the fuel through if all's going well. There is heat coming out of the exhaust pipe, so I think it's all looking good, touch wood. It's a few minutes later and it's pumping out hot air, so that is a good sign. I'll turn it off now and head off to my destination. Well, let's do as it says and call. I am arrived, and it's a nice quiet little campsite. 1, 2, I think 3 other people here, all very quiet though, no signs of activity. And spoke to the lady whose number you have to call when you turn up. She sounded very friendly, offered to come down and show me the ropes. I said there's nothing I really need, I'll just park up and make myself happy. And that was absolutely good. She told me where the bins are and the toilets. No showers on site, but that's fine. And it's really a fishing site. There's a big lake here which I can actually see out the side of the van. I'll get a shot of that in a minute. I'll go for a walk in a second, do a tour. But I'm not interested in fishing. It's never been my thing, no interest in that at all. But a nice quiet spot, and I've got no real plans. The only plan was to come away in the van for a night and see how well the heater does at keeping me warm. The van is currently very toasty because of course I had the van's own heater on, as in the cab heater, while I was driving along. So that's fine, it's nice and toasty. As soon as it starts to get chilly again, I'll stick the diesel unit on, the one that I installed, and we'll see how that goes. But I might just go and do a quick tour, or I might have some lunch. Let's have lunch, and then I'll go out for a quick tour this afternoon. Inverter. While I wait for the kettle to boil, I thought I'd have a quick look at what the Victron stuff was saying, and I noticed that the battery is 99% charged. I mean, it is drawing 75 amps to run the kettle, so we're starting off from 100% charged basically. And also, a second ago it said it was 6 degrees Celsius. The shunt is now at 7. I suspect that's warming up because of all that current passing through it. So essentially in the box where the battery is, the temperature is about 6 degrees. So it's not icy, but it's not warm. I brought some pre-made cheese sandwiches with me, so I just need to add a little tomato. I could put that in for an exhibition at the Tate. I need this cup of tea very much. Perfecto luncho. Magnifique, if I say so myself. Alright, lunch is done, so before it gets dark, which will only be in a couple of hours' time, let's go for a wander round the site. Well, first of all, this is the view looking forwards from where I've parked. Very distantly in all that fog. I think there's some hills over there. Possibly the Malverns, I'm not sure which way I'm facing. Anyway, that's quite nice. Now if you keep turning left, over there is the fishing lake. So I'll wander down that way if I can see a way through the electric fence. And just a quick look back at the site. As you can see, a small number of gravel plots. There is electric if you need it, but I don't. And they're quite wide plots, albeit nothing dividing them. I think it's a working farm of some sort. Well, the gate in the fence appears to be locked, so I may have to go around another way. However, there is the fishing lake, which I'm sure if you are into fishing is a thing of loveliness. It is really quite quiet here, just the odd passing vehicle. If you need to empty your chemical toilet, this is the Elsan point. Just tip it down that hole and wash out your toilet with the water from that hose. And then just down from that Elsan point, there is a freshwater supply point. And I believe that's the toilet block, so let's go have a look. I did pick this place because it had good reviews on PitchUp, which is where I book a lot of my sites. And also, it was fairly cheap. Only £15 for the night, which these days is cheap. Now, I know it doesn't include showers, but £15 it seems to be a good rate these days. You don't get much for less than £15, it seems. And here's one of the two loos. Certainly does the job, and there is a sufficient supply of toilet paper. Always good. If you are thinking of coming here for fishing, there's your fee. Also worth just pointing out, they do have a nice big rubbish bin here. I do believe there's a second lake down there. Actually, quite a lot of lake. Look, you've got one there and then another one there as well. Yes, quite right too. I was thinking when I got back in the van that I would put the heater on, but in fact, having just got back in the van, having walked around outside where it is getting pretty Arctic, it's probably about 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, it already feels infinitely warmer just to be inside the van, so I'm going to hold on for a little bit longer. It is now 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The warming effect of just coming back in the van has worn off, so I am going to stick the heater on. If I was this cold at home, I would have either turned the heating on or put a blanket over myself or something, so I think it is reasonable now to stick it on. Right, here we go again. On. It's saying it's 13 in here. I'm not sure I believe that. Heating. Temperature mode. 20 degrees, yes please. Here we go. I think 20 is a perfectly civilised temperature to aim for. Especially as, with the control unit there and the vent there, the control unit does tend to warm up a bit more than the rest of the van and will turn off before the van actually hits 20. With hindsight, that was not a good place to put the controller, because I have discovered that when I'm lying in bed, my head can hit it and the front of the controller comes off. And it doesn't seem to be so bad if I'm lying the other way round. My feet don't seem to knock it so much, but if I'm lying this way, which I will be tonight because the van is on a very slight slope, so my head will be at this end, and my head will knock that controller. The kettle is on and the heater is on. We're drawing 84 amps from the battery, but we are still at 97%, so plenty of charge to keep me going overnight. The temperature in the battery container, you'll notice, is 8 degrees. So although the heater thinks it's 13 here in the cab, it's 8 if you go into the cabinets where the battery is. We are getting close to the required 20. There we go, 20. Yes, and it is nice and warm in here now, so I'm thinking that thing will wind itself down a bit. In fact, it is, isn't it? The fan is varying slightly. Meanwhile, I have made more tea, because that is what you do. I don't understand why that, even though I've set it for 20, which is, it's the setting that you adjust with the knob, it's gone up to 26 degrees. And you can actually tell it in the settings whether you wanted to take the temperature for what it should be doing from this thing or from a sensor inside the heater itself. Now the one in the heater is currently at 21 degrees because it's cooler under there, it's near the wheel well. But here 26, and this is the sensor I've told it to use, but this is the temperature I've told it to go to. However, it was in a different mode. I've just put it into thermostat mode instead of whatever mode it was on before, which surely should make it go to the temperature I've told it to go to, which is 20. Maybe it's time to dig out the manual again. The discovery seems to be that it needs to be in thermostat mode, which is what it's now in, and as you can hear, it's just switched itself off, rather than temperature mode. Temperature mode, it was just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Thermostat mode, it's done what you'd expect. Well, mind you, I'd have expected it to do that in temperature mode. You set the temperature, get to the temperature. But no, thermostat mode, it is doing what I'd expect. It's now blown cooler air out and turned itself off. And I imagine it will now get cooler and cooler and then it'll turn itself back on again. So that's what I wanted all along. And because of that on and off, it won't be using up the juice all the time. So it should last a long time, hopefully. Well, 'tis definitely chilly outside, inasmuch as quite clearly all my breathing is causing condensation on the windows. And also, though it may not be showing up in the video, it is getting quite dark outside, so I think I'm going to put the window covers on. In good news, the heater is now performing as expected. It's switching itself on, heating the van up, then it switches itself off, van gets a little chillier, heater comes back on again. That is all good, and it is staying nice and toasty, apart from my feet, which are freezing, but they're always freezing. But the rest of me is fine. That is all good, all sealed in and cosy for the night. Although it is still only mid-afternoon. That's winter for you. It is just about 6 o'clock in the evening, definitely getting colder outside. The heating keeps kicking itself on more frequently. I am going to have a little look and see how we're doing on the fuel in the tank, because I cannot for the life of me remember how much this thing uses, and I don't want to run out when I want to be warm in the morning, so I may need to eke it out, but I just have to steel myself to actually go outside, where it will be very chilly indeed. I have also, I confess, put a blanket on my feet, because my feet are just not getting warm at all, even in slippers and thick socks, so they had to be taken care of. The rest of me is fine. Okay, let's do it. Also, how loud is the heater out here? Well, it's a gentle roar. You can't hear the clicking of the pump. Oh, the fuel level is here, and it only started about here, so it's used virtually nothing. That is good news. It's 6:30, which is a little early for my evening meal, but I am ravenous. Warm, but ravenous. And I was contemplating having a tinned beef bolognese thing with some rice, but I've decided rice is a pain to do in the van because of all the straining and rinsing and messing about you have to do. So I'm going to do something much simpler, which is a slab of corned beef and some baked beans. Hang on, there we go. Baked beans. It's easy to do and it's easy to clean up afterwards. For this purpose I have brought out the cooking machine, the induction hob. I will tip the beans into that pan and warm them up, and then add a chunk of corned beef. I know how to live. I think we can all agree that Gordon Ramsay will be calling soon asking for the recipe. A banana for dessert, then another lovely cup of tea and some cake. Fit for a king. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I've mostly spent the evening just chilling, watching stuff on the iPad. I think now it's time to go to bed. I have been kept very warm by the diesel heater, so it definitely fulfills its function. All is good on that front. I have, however, turned it off for overnight because it is quite noisy while it's running, all that blowing air. So I'm going to have to throw on all the winter duvet and all the blankets I've got, I think, to keep myself warm. And then in the morning, give it a quick blast before I poke my nose out from under the duvet. So I will bid you good night. Good morning. It's gone 9 o'clock, which is very lazy, and I have been deliciously warm underneath a duvet and 2 blankets all night. But out here, outside the sphere of the duvet and blankets, it is decidedly chilly, and I don't actually want to get up. So I think I will pop the heater on again, see if we can bring the temperature up, and only then will I consider getting out and having some breakfast. Now the trouble is, of course, that the heater vent is actually down below the bed, so all that lovely heat it's going to push out is going to be a bit blocked. So I need to push the bed in a bit in order to let the rest of the van heat up. £6 heating, thermostat mode 21. Here we go. got the hang of this now. I have retreated to one half of the bed, leaving the slats open to bring the heat up. As I will shortly be returning home, I have foregone washing and a change of clothes until I get back home. It only makes sense. However, I am going to have some breakfast before I set off, lest I faint dramatically on the drive home. However, there is something puzzling me about the van that I've not ever noticed on any other van channels before, and it's to do with the window. What would you call it? I'll show you. I don't know what the word is for it. You see the black thing? What do you call this? It gets banged onto the metal round the edge of the window, and you bang it on with a mallet when you're putting the window in, and it's coming away at the corners. I mean, that, when I put it in, was round with the metal, and now you can see there's a gap. It's gently folded itself away. And you might think, well, if the whole thing is shrinking, and if we look at the gap, now when I put this in, there was a little gap, but it seems to me that gap has got bigger. I think whatever this is shrinking slightly. So that gap is bigger than it was. I didn't cut this perfectly, but I didn't cut it that badly. These ends nearly met. And it's slightly coming away there. And it's all right there. But yes, distinctly, it's come away there. And if I try and push it back in there, well, now, of course, you've got the window on the other side, because this went in before the window was glued on. So trying to push it back in is going up against the glue that's holding the window in. And anyway, the whole thing has come away because it seems to be shrunk. And if I push that in, it'll pull the other end off. So this is very weird. And it's also happened on the other side. I can put my finger in that gap, but this was originally well and truly squished onto the metal. So is it a known thing that this trim will contract? Now, what I'm tempted to do in this case is, well, in both cases, is loosen the whole thing up, bang it back into the corners, and live with a bigger gap between the two ends, which I can fill with some sealant or something. That's if I can get it back in again, given the glue of the window gets in the way of squishing it. That is not an issue I had ever considered as being something I'd ever have to tackle again. Thought once the windows were in and done, that was it. But has anyone else with a camper van seen this happen? Where the edging bit, the trim strip, comes away from the metal? It's rather perplexing and annoying. Breakfast this morning is waffles with fake maple syrup, because it's cheaper than the real stuff, and of course a cup of tea. And just before we finish, a look at the state of charge of the battery, down to 81%. I think that's the lowest I've ever had it. That's from running the heating quite a lot, and of course the induction hob and the kettle again this morning, heating again this morning, and the fridge, which has been running constantly. The lights take nothing, so that's irrelevant. Consumed amp hours, 62 amp hours gone. Just thinking about that, if 62 amp hours gone represents roughly 20% gone, that means 31 amp hours would be 10, which means it would estimate the battery's capacity at 3 kilowatt hours, but in fact it's 4 kilowatt hours. So capacity has vanished somewhere there, and I will assume that is perhaps due to the cold or the battery having sat at 100% for the last few months while I haven't been really using the van. And after an entire afternoon and evening of use with the temperature set in the van to 21 and the outside temperature going down to about 1 or even 0, the level is still here and it didn't start that much higher. So that really has fairly sipped the fuel. I'm pleased with that. Well, breakfast has been had. It's now 11 o'clock. I think it's time I'm supposed to leave the campsite, so I will head off. Thanks for watching. Cheerio.